Welcome to part 2 of the Week 12 preview brought to you by Brian's Deductions. I'd like to start by saying happy Thanksgiving to those who celebrate as we are recording this the day after. If you did not get to see part 1, that will be in the description below. For those who this is your first time clicking on the video, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to click on this video, and for those who are returning, I appreciate you for continuing to support. So without further ado, let's jump right into the content. So the first game we have is the Jaguars and the Texans. So first time these teams played was week three, and the Texans won 37-17 in what was basically a preview for things to come in terms of what we saw from C.J.Stroud. It was almost like his coming out party, so to speak. So for this game, well, in that game, a big part of it was the difference in red zone efficiency, as the Texans were able to score 23 of those 37 points in the red zone, while the Jaguars were only able to score 10 of those 17 points and only make 2 total in that game. And I think and obviously red zone efficiency, I believe, is going to be a big part of the game. And I think another part for sure is going to be turnover differential, as both of them are tied for ninth place, and Jacksonville, as of right now, is solidified as alone as first in takeaways per game. Obviously, last week they were tied with the 49ers, but of course the 49ers played Thursday, so right now Jacksonville is alone in terms of takeaways per game. So for the Jags, I think the biggest thing in this game is going to be if Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley continue to connect and find ways to make magic. Because as we've seen, when Calvin's been involved, he's been able to produce. They've been able to score the ball pretty well. I think that this is a game. This is also a game where obviously they'll try to get Travis Etienne involved a lot more. We kind of talked about last week how he unlocks his offense, and while he was a little bit quieter because of course Trevor had a great performance, and as we said, he was able to connect with Calvin Ridley for a couple touchdowns last week. I think he's obviously a big factor as well, but I think because of the nature of how this game may go, this may be a situation where Trevor and Calvin have to have another big day through the year in order to keep up. On the Texans side, obviously we've seen what C.J.Stroud has done so far. It'll be intriguing to see how he bounces back from his first subpar game, as he had the 3 interceptions last week. But again, the defense came to play. Another thing is going to be how the Texans are able to run the football, because the effectiveness of that will probably determine how much is asked of CJ, even though we know he can handle it, how much is asked of CJ in this game, and how they can dictate, and the being able to run the football will probably give an idea of how they can dictate to Jacksonville's defense, especially since they are fourth against the run right now. So if they're able to run the football effectively, it obviously opens things up, allows CJ to settle in and maybe not have to do as much as we saw last week with the Cardinals, and just one of those things where if you're able to grind away, keep, and win a time of possession battle, and keep Trevor and keep Trevor off the field, obviously that's a big piece. And then again, as we said earlier, doing that may lead to Jacksonville having to feel like they needed to keep up. And maybe that leads to them giving ETN less touches and maybe asking Trevor to throw the ball more. So for this game, I believe while I believe the Jaguars will pull up a good fight, and I believe that this will be a high-scoring affair, I think that the Texans find a way to win at home and pull off the upset and take over first place in the AFC South with the final score of 30-28. Next game, we have the Steelers and the Bengals. Of course, the Bengals are without Joe Burrow, and they've had a losing record without him. I think in this game, obviously you want to try to make sure you get Jamar Chase involved as often as you can, but this feels more like a game where Joe Mixon has to get the football early and often. Because if you're able to run the ball, as we just said with the Texans, it's C.J.Stroud, it's a situation where you allow Jake Browning to settle into the game. Now, obviously, if you're the Steelers, you're trying to take away the run game early and say, hey, Jake is going to have to beat us. But the game, they can be had on the ground as they are currently 23rd against the run. And they're also 23rd against the pass, but because it's not Burrow, it's not as the passing game from Cincinnati doesn't seem as scared. Even though, of course, again, you got a top 5 receiver in Jamar Chase. So this is one of those where I feel like if you're the Bengals, obviously your best chance of success, even though you're currently 30th in rushing yards per game, is being able to get the ground game going and try to keep this as low scoring as possible, and obviously take up all of the time of possession that you can. If you're the Steelers, while obviously you're going to try to make sure you get the ball to Jalen Warren, get Najee Harris involved even more, try to make sure you get Deontay Johnson and George Pickens going. It all goes back to the quarterback. If Kenny Pickett plays above average, they should be able to win this game. Obviously, going against Jake Browning instead of Joe Burrow, you're expected to have the better performance. Also, you did just fire. If it's the Steelers, you did just fire Matt Canada, but this is a situation where I'm sure people believe that the offense will likely be opened up a little bit now. I don't think that they're going to turn into the Miami Dolphins overnight and just have everybody like in motion and just bombs away. But I do think it's a situation where the playbook may be opened up a little bit more. So if you're Kenny, you have to go out there and show. You almost have to go out there and show that Matt was the issue, so to speak. Almost like, for lack of a better comparison, kind of what Josh Allen did last week in Buffalo, where even though, of course, a lot of the players were coming out and seemingly, in defense for Ken Dorsey, they did go out there and they had a very impressive performance. So this is one of those where if you're the Steelers, you gotta look at the quarterback, because he's basically obviously the point guard of your offense. And in order for Jalen and Najee and Deontay and George to get going, you have to look at the quarterbacks first. So this is going to be a big game for Kenny Pickett because it's in the division and it's against a team who is without their starting quarterback for the rest of the season. So for this game, I believe that it's a little bit more on the lower scoring side. I think this may, because obviously it's the AFC North football and it'll be close and it's a knockdown, drag-out fight usually whenever these teams are involved. Very physical kind of game. So for this one, I have the Steelers winning 23-17. All right, now we move to the South for another first place first place showdown between the Saints and the Falcons. So for the Falcons, a big piece is obviously going to be running the football, as we said before. But obviously Arthur Smith is big on running the football and trying to make sure you run effectively. As in both situations, whether they won or lost, they've carried the ball a good amount of times, but obviously they've been more effective in wins than when they in wins. But this game in particular, whether Taylor Heineke or Desmond Ridder is the starting quarterback, I think the X factor in this game is Drake London. I feel like you have to make sure that you get him. You have to make sure in this kind of game, even if your run game is effective, I believe that there will be times where the Saints, where you have to make explosive plays against the Saints through the air, because I do think at some point they'll just stack the box and say, okay, if Heineke or Ritter beat us, then we'll just tip our cap and deal with it then. So being able to get Drake London going would be big, because it would probably open up the offense for the rest of the guys. Kind of similar to what we saw with the Packers-Lions game this week, where that big play to Christian Watson to start the game seemed to settle everybody down and allow them to, kind of play free and go down, get a quick score, and kind of, start fast. So being able to get your wide receiver one going would be huge in a game like this, against your division rival. For the Saints, while I believe that this will be a game where we see a heavy dose of Alvin Kamara, I believe that obviously the biggest factor is Derek Carr if he does end up playing. Obviously, he was in concussion protocol, but they did have a bye week, so I believe he's good to go. But if he's not, then I believe it will be a Jameis Winston game. But if Derek's able to go, this is one of the reasons why you went to go get him for games like this. As we talked about a few weeks ago. If Derek Carr plays like he did against the Colts, I believe, then they should be able to take over this division and be a solid playoff team for sure. So you have to see that kind of Derek Carr in this game, because on both sides, I think this kind of goes like the Steelers-Bengals game, where it's going to be on the lower side of scoring, and obviously it'll probably be a one-score game throughout, and the biggest difference is going to be which quarterback makes those one or two explosive plays in the passing game to put their team over the hump. And we've seen time and time again this year, it's usually been Derek Carr throwing a fly route to Rashid Shaheed at the end of the game to kind of clinch the games. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another play like that this weekend. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for the Saints. They just have to get the Derek Carr that they saw against the Colts and other teams that were in games that they win this year. So for this one, like I said, I think it'll be a little bit more on the lower score side. I think it'll be a one-score game. And for this one, I have the Saints winning 24-18. All right, so to our next matchup, moving a little more west, we have the Chiefs and the Raiders. So for the Chiefs, I think the biggest thing is obviously just going to be making sure you take care of the football. They're currently tied tied for second in terms of the most giveaways per game. They've given it over at a higher rate in losses than wins, for sure. But in terms of the number of total turnovers, it's been almost dead even when it comes to giveaways. So that's gonna be a big part for sure. But kind of like I said with the 49ers Seahawks game this week, I believe this is a game where they just kind of where they rely on their defense to win this game, and obviously they'll probably try to get guys going, the Justin Watsons, the MVSs, and guys like that. Try to get some work, especially probably in the red zone. So that because I'm sure they're still trying to tweak things in that area, as they obviously haven't been as effective as they usually are in the red zone. So it'll be interesting to see with what wrinkles Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have in the pass game this week to try to avoid some of the mistakes that they had last week against the Eagles. And for the Raiders, while I understand that the Chiefs are 18th against the run, and obviously since Antonio Pierce has taken over, the Raiders have been better on the ground, and Josh Jacobs has been effective. I'm sure this is a game where, as much as they want to keep the ball on the ground, they're gonna have to throw, because even if the game is relatively close, this is one of those where I'm sure Steve Spagnuolo is looking at it and saying, I'm not letting Josh Jacobs or Devontae Adams beat me. So if Jacoby Myers beats me, if Hunter Renfrow or Michael Mayer beat me, then we'll deal with that. But, yeah, so this is one of those where it's going to be relying on AidanO'Connell to make plays. So we saw some flashes last week, especially the deep ball to Devontae Adams for a touchdown. And even the interception to end the game shows that Aidan's willing to take chances when they're there. So as a player and probably as a coach, you like to see that, because that shows that they're not afraid to push the ball down the field, and they're not afraid to try to make plays if they're there. Now, the biggest thing is just trying to make sure that he doesn't turn the ball over as frequently. But I do think this is a game where he'll probably have to throw the ball 30 to 35 times, just because it's probably going to get to the point where you start to look and you just say, okay, even if we have to throw swing passes to Josh Jacobs, passing the ball here is more effective than us just trying to get 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So as I said before, I think this is just a situation where Kansas City's defense just rules the day, and they just make life miserable for the Raiders offense all day. And I think offensively they make just enough plays to keep the Raiders at bay, and they may get a turnover or two. That turns the game from a close game to not quite a blowout, but again just enough to keep Las Vegas at bay. So my final score for that game is 27-16 for the Kansas City Chiefs. So to another primetime game, a 4:25 game if I'm not mistaken. The Bills and the Eagles. This game could very well, kind of like obviously most of the games we said said today, could probably just come down to red zone efficiency and turnover differential. As in the red zone, both teams are top 10, and in terms of turnover differential, they're both kind of middle of the pack. For the Bills, obviously, everything is going to run through Josh Allen. We talked about how he played better last week. And the biggest thing is obviously just making sure he keeps the ball out of harm's way, because in wins, he's only had 4 giveaways this year, but in losses he's had 11. So finding a way to continue to balance playing the type of game that he does, while also making sure that he's careful and not, completely reckless and trying to make every throw in the book, or trying to run every linebacker he sees over, is a big thing. On the Eagles side, I think Jalen Hurts obviously had a tough week last week against the Chiefs, but I think that this is a game where he'll be better, because I don't think A.J.Brown's getting held to one catch for 8 yards again, no matter what defense he's playing. I think that Philly will be a little bit better from a physical standpoint, and we saw what DeAndre Swift was able to do in the last game, so I believe that he will be an effective runner again as well. In total, I think that both teams will combine for 4 receivers /tight ends having at least 60 yards receiving. I think that this will be a bounce back game for both wide receiver ones, both the Bills and the Eagles. Not that Stephon had a terrible game, but obviously I think that going up against a team that's 28th against the pass in terms of yards per game, if I'm not mistaken, is the perfect time, perfect remedy to get your guy going. Especially since as we said last week, I think it might have been last week, either last week or during week 10. That the last time he had scored in a win was week 4 against Miami. So we'll see what he does this week. But I believe the Eagles. While I believe that the Bills will put up a great fight, and both teams will put up great numbers, I think that the Eagles ride their home field momentum to a win, and they find a way to win 31-26. To our final game of the preview, we have the Sunday night game, the Ravens versus the Chargers. So again, obviously red zone efficiency is going to be a big thing, as both of these teams are within the top 5 of red zone efficiency. This is going to be a nice strength versus strength battle when it comes to the Ravens defense and the Chargers offense, because the Chargers are currently 9th in passing yards per game, while the Ravens are 3rd in passing yards allowed per game, and they're 1st in sacks per game. So that's strength for sure. On the Chargers side, I believe that this is a game where you have to. I believe that the X factor is Austin Eckler, because they have to get the run game going in some capacity. Because even though we just said obviously it's going to be a strength versus strength battle, if LA is unable to run the football, I'm not too sure how effective they'll be, even with Justin Herbert playing at at the level he's played practically this whole season, showing that he deserves to be in the top 3 QB discussions for sure. But you got to find a way to get Austin Eckler involved early and often. I believe that obviously Keenan Allen will have a good game. The question is, will Quentin Johnston, Jaden Guyton, guys like that make strides and avoid key drops as well. But the biggest thing in my mind is how Austin Eckler performs in this game. For Baltimore, I believe that this is a situation where you continue to try to make strides in the passing game as you're going against a team who is currently last in the league in passing yards allowed per game. So obviously this is a game where you want to try to get your guys involved. You want to try to see who can fill the void. Obviously, it'll be more of a receiver by committee thing, but who can fill the void for Mark Andrews? Isaiah likely has shown the capability of being able to fill the shoes a little bit. Obviously, he's not going to give you the exact production that Mark Andrews does, but he's filled in admirably when Mark Andrews has been injured the last couple years. I think this could be a big game for Zay Flowers if he's healthy. Odell as well, but Zay Flowers for sure. I believe he'll be motivated, obviously, as the Chargers had a chance to take him, and they decided to take Quentin Johnston instead. So that may be a little bit of a motivation factor for him for sure. But I think this is obviously a game where you could put some good numbers through the air, especially if you're Lamar. As people have said, that obviously the MVP race is still wide open. There are people, especially one person on What's the Play in CT that believe that Lamar obviously should be in top three MVP conversations, and the only reason why he isn't right now is because of his statistics, which I can agree with for sure. Even though I believe if the Ravens didn't blow the game against the Browns and somehow found a way to beat the Steelers, it may be a little different because he would obviously have kind of the same narrative that Jalen Hurts does right now, even though Jalen's stats are a little bit. Even though the argument would be that Jalen's stats are better than Lamar's. But I think this is a good chance for Lamar to put up some good numbers, get himself going conversation wise and MVP candidacy, and also just overall just figuring out using this game as not, I don't want to say a get right game because they played well last week, but using this game as a launching point to determine how they want to run the offense from a passing standpoint going forward and who they want to run the offense through, so to speak, going forward as they get ready for this playoff push. So for this game, I believe again it'll be a pretty high scoring game. I think that the Chargers will be obviously trying to match Baltimore for most of the night, and I think because they have number 10 back there, they'll be able to do it just because again Justin's just been on another level as of late. But I think that the Ravens find a way to win this game, and I believe they win 34-28. So that was part 2 of the Week 12 preview. Again, if you didn't get to see part 1, it'll be in the description below. Go check that out. See how we did in terms of how the games went both Thursday and today. And I'd like to thank you for tuning in. Should have the Week 12 recap coming out Monday, and then we should have another special episode coming out with both with a couple of special guests from the WTP family, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in again, and just stay tuned for the next play.